Let's take a look at your market news now. Asian stocks and currencies tumbled further this morning as the rising death toll from the coronavirus spreading from China led airlines to cut flights and stores to close, increasing pressure on the world's second largest economy as fears of a pandemic grow. JP Morgan economists said a big negative shock in the current quarter could knock China's growth from a previously forecast 6.3% to 4.9%. ING economists made a similar forecast yesterday. So Japan's Nikkei dropped 1.8% to 22,977 points. Hong Kong's Hang Seng was down 2.9% and has lost more than 8% in the 10 days since the spread of the virus roiled markets. It now sits at 26,386 points. Shanghai's market is still closed for the Lunar New Year. Let's go to the United States now, where the S&P 500 ended slightly lower last night as an initial boost from the likes of Apple, Boeing and General Electric following their quarterly results faded in the wake of a policy announcement from the Federal Reserve. Stocks initially showed little reaction to the Fed's policy statement, but steadily lost ground on the heels of a news conference by Chairman Jerome Powell. The Fed held rates steady as expected while offering no new guidance on its balance sheet, but Powell noted that, and I quote, uncertainties about the outlook remain. He also noted the coronavirus outbreak in China. The Dow Jones Industrial was marginally up to 28,734 points. The S&P 500 gave up 0.1% to 3,273 points, and the Nasdaq Composite added 0.06% to 9,275 points. Let's go to the Johannesburg Stock Exchange. Arabile Gumede is standing by. Very good afternoon to you, Arabile. What's moving the market this afternoon?
Yeah, good afternoon, Nzinga. So it certainly does seem like a little bit of that coronavirus is still in the system, unfortunately, then for the global market, as it seems that demand begins to wane for some parts of whether it be the equity market or perhaps the oil market as well. We're seeing that oil price dip below $59 a barrel as well, which will certainly be of key interest as to what exactly OPEC will do with regards to that. Do they shut a little bit more of the supply constraints or increase the supply situation there, or perhaps decrease it as well to try and pull those levers? On the local front, we do have a little bit of news as well. The likes of Tongaat Hewlett looking to come back onto the JSE after having suspended trading in June last year. Of course, embattled really, considering the scandal that faces them. And even the likes of Cell C, who of course are trading on the JSE through Blue Label Telecom, which is their major shareholder there. And they've decided to continue their sponsorship of the Sharks in Super Rugby as well. So that will be quite telling for a business. But on the global front, as I said, it is certainly that coronavirus. Let's see how much impact it certainly has had, and amongst other things, of course. And we'll check in on those numbers right now and then get into the details right after this. Welcome back. Now, I've certainly received some news as well then from SAA actually, and I'd like to just perhaps get into the statement that has been formally released. It's a media statement then from South African Airways, really just detailing that the rescue practitioners did indeed secure that post-commencement funding of 3.5 billion from the Development Bank of Southern Africa. They say that the purpose of the funding is to provide a bridge then to facilitate the development and indeed the publication of the business rescue plan by the practitioners by the end of February for presentation to creditors shortly thereafter. The conservation of cash through various cost reduction measures is critical, they say, to running an efficient airline and to create a platform on which a future for a restructured entity can be built. Philip Saunders, the Chief Commercial Officer, noting that they're committed to accommodating all affected customers on alternative flights as well, considering the changes that they made not so long ago to try and perhaps bring things together. Chris Gilmore, independent analyst, joins us here at the Johannesburg Stock Exchange to perhaps chat about this and a whole lot more. Chris, it's been quite interesting. They've received that 3.5 billion rand. The Development Bank of Southern Africa is the ones to have given them that sentiment or that money as well. Then, do you think that perhaps they've kind of gotten the idea here that it's hard going, so they need to be a little bit more strategic in how they spend this money?
Oh, look, I think the DBSA, Development Bank of South Africa, is going to be looking at these guys very, very closely indeed, because this is a loan. And on the face of it, at least, it's a properly commercial bank loan.
Yeah.
And therefore, this is not a bailout. This is not a gimme. So I think they're going to have to be applying proper banking standards to this whole thing.
Sure.
Now, it's fascinating. I mean, I heard on the radio this morning, the CEO of SA Express, I think, is owed an awful lot of money by SAA.
Yeah.
And she said that she's heard nothing yet about how she's going to get repaid. Is part of that money going to be used to repay creditors? Is part of that money going to be used to pay off Comair, for example, which I think is going to be getting a few hundred million or even $1 billion?
Yeah.
So I don't know. As we were saying off air, this is an expensive operation to run.
Yeah.
Just purchasing jet fuel for long-haul travel, when you've only got 10 or 15 or 20 people on your aircraft, as we saw in that photograph the other day, is not sustainable. So, a lot of water has still got to pass under the bridge before we can take or make a reasoned assessment of all of this.
Yeah, it's certainly going to get very difficult and worse perhaps before it gets any better by the seams of things. So we'll certainly scrutinize this, hopefully as much as DBSA, who hopefully will do even more work actually. Hopefully their due diligence makes sense on this one, because that'll be of keen question. All right, let's get into this market picture then. The likes of Tongaat Hewlett, they had a huge misrepresentation scandal. The financials for, I think, the year ended March 2018 is the ones really under scrutiny. Misstating financials by as much as 4.5 billion is material.
Yeah. And Gavin Hudson, the new CEO, I think has proven his mettle in the past few months. A no-nonsense ex-SAB man, and he's really gone to town. And he hasn't held back on criticism of the previous regime. Now, we had the PwC forensic report. We only got a couple of pages of that. And Hudson made the point that they can't publish the entire thing because of the fact that there may well be legal arguments put in place over the next few weeks and months against the previous incumbents of the board. So you're right, it may be coming back to the market as soon as next week. Huge loss coming through here. How are they going to recapitalize themselves? We don't know. They're having a presentation to the Investment Analyst Society. It's going to be broadcast from KZN. There's not a live one up in Joburg, but you can link into it. And it'll be fascinating to see how they go through that whole thing. I think Hudson and his team, you must give them a lot of credit for this, because now they've become very, very open, very, very transparent.
Sure.
And they're going to have to carry on in that vein if they reasonably want to hope that the investing public is going to come back. I mean, the share price has dipped by 85% in the past year.
I mean, they literally lost 3/4 of their share price just in the 6 months to June 2019 alone, right? Last year. So
that's right.
There's certainly a whole lot of hurt. Do you think the market will trust them again, despite them being as open as they possibly could be from here on in?
Look, it'll be a long road to recovery. Sugar markets aren't wonderful. And I think they're going to be homing in particularly on the land sales. That's where an awful lot of, I'm going to use an interesting word, a lot of schmockling appears to have gone on in the past. And so, there'll be a lot of scrutiny taking place on that side of things. So look, it's like the old expression, you can build a reputation fairly quickly, but it takes years to build a reputation, shall I say, and it's gone in an instant. And rebuilding that reputation is going to take an equally long time.
Yeah. Okay, let's get into the retail space, perhaps one of your more favored ones in terms of commentary as well. Massmart coming out with numbers. Things are still actually dire. And look, the consumers are not going to make it any easy for you either.
Yeah. Consumer spending is low and getting worse. And if you look at the retail sales figures we saw for November, which came out a week or so ago, not particularly inspiring, 2.6% up, I think. And I think if you look at the narrative that accompanies Massmart, what I find interesting is that if you look at retail sales, the retail sales figures from Stats SA, food and beverage in those figures were up 6%.
Yeah.
But that's not reflected in Massmart's figures, particularly on the liquor side. I would have thought the liquor would have done far, far better than that. So I think maybe they've lost a bit of market share. That's what I'm extrapolating out of that. I could be wrong. Over and above that, they've gone backwards in many parts of the business, and they're going to be taking a really hard look at themselves, and I think they have been over the past 6 months since Mitchell Slape, the new CEO who's taken over there from America. He's got no baggage attached to him. I think he's going to take a very hard and dispassionate view. He's realigning the business. He's streamlining it into 2 businesses rather than 4.
Sure.
Retail and wholesale. And, it'll be interesting to see when the actual results come out at the end of Feb, just how bad they are.
Yeah, it really does look really worse for wear on that front. De Beers, right? So 85% owned by Anglo-American. Anglo seemingly having gone through a massive restructuring, would have hoped that one of their gold standard shares, investments would have perhaps been making it. Now we're seeing perhaps a slight pickup in diamond sales again. What is it, 9% uptick in the first sale of the year? So not too bad.
Yeah, and it's important because you go back last year, they were having a tough time. The gem industry generally was in the doldrums. It's interesting, it's absolutely fascinating, in fact, because if you look at the global economy, and we were saying earlier that the global economy looks like it may be dipping into some sort of recession, but within that broad overview of the global economy, the rich are undoubtedly getting richer, and the poor are probably getting a bit poorer. So the market, the target market for De Beers products around the world is in that middle to upper middle income and the upper income brackets as well. Excuse me. And they're still actually doing pretty well. It's all about sentiment. Is sentiment going to improve amongst those people? And if so, are they going to keep on buying De Beers? De Beers have been very clever over the years, the way they've restructured themselves, the marketing, everything about it. They still have this old site story where you get a box, and you've got to take it, and you can't answer back, and if you don't like what you've got, tough. So look, I think it comes back to what I was just saying. It's about marketing. They've been very, very clever. The brand De Beers has stood the test of time, and it's actually going very nicely.
All right, very quickly, are you a rugby man at all, Chris?
At an international level, yes.
Yeah,
I know what you're going to ask me.
On a local level. The Sharks continuing to get sponsorship from SABC. SABC's laden with debt.
Yeah.
One would think you need to pull back on a few things, including this. But some analysts perhaps might say, in a time like this, don't necessarily be too quick to let go of things like marketing, things like sponsorship, because then it becomes a self-fulfilling prophecy. Would you agree with that notion?
Well, as I just said in relation to De Beers, marketing is critically important. But I equally take your point that when you're in so much trouble, when you're owing people like Warren Buffett so much money, when you're owing the DBSA so much money, it's a critical balance here. So you obviously feel you've got to keep your head above water, and the Sharks, they were traditionally been a good team. I haven't followed them, so I don't know. I mean,
they've become a better team now, but that's for our sports desk to unpack a little bit more. But okay, we'll certainly see how it fares on that front. It's going to be really interesting for them to see if anybody even looks to take them up again, actually, perhaps in some sort of sale. MTN perhaps looking a little more prime considering their roaming agreement. But Chris, really appreciate it. Thank you so much for the time. Really great chatting to you. Chris Gilmore, independent analyst there, joining us to help unpack that market movement. As I said, a little bit of a flat stance for the JSE All Share, nowhere really to go. I suppose that coronavirus still not encouraging market participants to form part of the market as it currently stands. A little bit of weakness for the local currency and a fall still in that oil price. We'll continue to unpack the market and more economic news coming up right after the short break with my colleague Nzinga Kunta. But from